Dr. Kira Voss had been assigned many peculiar research projects during her tenure at the Galactic Xenobiology Institute, but studying human reproductive patterns ranked among the strangest. The four-armed Altarian researcher adjusted her data pad with two hands while her other pair sorted through biological samples, a habit that had served her well throughout her career, studying the mating rituals of 17 different species. Humans, she muttered, her violet eyes scanning the preliminary reports. No designated mating season, no visible physical transformations, no territorial displays during reproductive periods. The data seemed incomplete, possibly corrupted. Every intelligent species in the known galaxy followed predictable reproductive cycles, except, apparently, for these curious bipeds from the third planet of an unremarkable star system. The research station orbiting Earth hummed with activity as scientists from 12 different worlds conducted their various studies on humanity's recent addition to the galactic community. Kira's laboratory occupied a modest section of the facility, equipped with the most advanced reproductive analysis equipment the Institute could provide. She had requested human volunteers for her study, expecting the typical seasonal limitations that governed all other species. To her surprise, the human liaison officer, a friendly male named Jack, had laughed when she explained her research parameters. "Dr. Voss," he had said with that peculiar facial expression humans called a smile, "I think you're going to find our biology quite different from what you're expecting." Now, 3 days into her research, Kira was beginning to understand what Jack meant. The initial hormone analysis of her human subjects defied every established pattern in her xenobiological database. Male humans, she discovered, produced reproductive cells continuously, rather than during specific seasonal windows. The implications staggered her scientific understanding. Her research partner, Dr. Thane from the crystalline world of Nexus Prime, materialized beside her workstation in his characteristic shimmer of light. "Kira, have you verified these readings? The human male subjects show consistent reproductive hormone levels across all measurement periods." "I've run the tests 17 times, Kira replied, her secondary arms gesturing toward the holographic displays floating above her desk. "The data remains consistent. Unlike Altarian males who experience reproductive viability only during the crimson moon cycles or your own species' triannual fertile periods, human males appear to maintain reproductive capability year-round." Thane's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. "That seems excessive. How do their societies function without the natural reproductive regulatory periods that govern social organization?" Kira had wondered the same thing. Every civilized species structured their cultures around reproductive cycles. The great festivals celebrating fertile periods, the careful resource allocation during non-reproductive seasons, the complex social hierarchies that emerge from cyclical mating rites. Human society, from her preliminary observations, operated on entirely different principles. "Perhaps," she suggested, "this explains their rapid population expansion and territorial spread. Without seasonal limitations, they can reproduce continuously." The implications extended beyond simple biology. If humans could reproduce without seasonal constraints, their expansion patterns, resource requirements, and social structures would differ fundamentally from every other known intelligent species. This discovery could revolutionize galactic understanding of human behavior and their potential impact on interstellar civilization. Kira made detailed notes while planning her next phase of research. She needed to understand not just the biological mechanisms, but the evolutionary advantages that had led to such an unusual reproductive strategy. More importantly, she needed to comprehend how this continuous fertility affected human psychology, relationships, and society. The research was about to become far more complex than she had initially anticipated. 3 weeks into her expanded research program, Dr. Kira Voss found herself questioning fundamental principles of evolutionary biology. Her laboratory had become a hub of activity, as word spread throughout the research station about the anomalous human reproductive data. Scientists from 6 different species had requested access to her preliminary findings, each expressing disbelief at the implications. The human volunteer, Tom, sat patiently as Kira conducted her 5th comprehensive examination. Unlike subjects from other species who required careful timing and environmental conditions for reproductive analysis, Tom maintained consistent biological markers, regardless of Earth's seasonal position, lunar phases, or any other astronomical variables that typically influenced fertility cycles. Tom, Kira asked, her translator device converting her native language into human English, do males of your species experience any periods of diminished reproductive interest or capability? Tom considered the question thoughtfully. Well, sure, individual variation exists. Stress, health, age, all those factors matter. But there's no species-wide pattern like you've described for other aliens. Human males don't have an off-season for reproduction. Dr. Thane materialized beside them, his crystalline form radiating scientific excitement. Tom, in my species, males become reproductively active only once every 3 standard years. During inactive periods, we focus entirely on intellectual and creative pursuits. How do human males maintain productivity while constantly reproductively viable? I guess we just manage both? Tom replied with a shrug. Humans are pretty good at multitasking. Kira exchanged glances with Thane. The casual nature of Tom's response highlighted just how alien human biology was compared to galactic norms. She pulled up holographic displays showing reproductive hormone cycles from 12 different species, all showing dramatic peaks and valleys corresponding to mating seasons. The human data appeared as steady lines with minor fluctuations. This explains several puzzling aspects of human behavior, Kira noted, updating her research files. Their literature contains romantic themes year-round. Their entertainment media frequently depicts mating behaviors regardless of season, and their social customs don't include the reproductive isolation periods common to all other species. Dr. Nala, a reptilian researcher from the desert world of Kepler 442b, slithered into the laboratory. I've been analyzing human population distribution patterns, she announced. Unlike species that concentrate populations during mating seasons and disperse during non-reproductive periods, humans maintain consistent social clustering year-round. The implications continued to multiply. Kira realized that human urban planning, resource distribution, social hierarchies, and even their approach to interstellar expansion reflected their unique reproductive biology. While other species organized their entire civilizations around predictable fertility cycles, humans had developed complex societies that accommodated continuous reproductive potential. Tom, Kira asked, how do human societies prevent overpopulation without natural reproductive regulation periods? We developed social and technological solutions, Tom explained. Education, contraception, family planning, economic considerations. We regulate reproduction through conscious choice rather than biological cycles. Dr. Thane's form pulsed with amazement. They've overcome biological determinism through cultural evolution. Kira found herself reconsidering everything she knew about the relationship between biology and civilization. Human males, unencumbered by seasonal fertility limitations, had apparently contributed to a species that could maintain complex social organizations while supporting continuous population growth potential. This biological quirk might explain humanity's rapid technological advancement and their seemingly chaotic but effective approach to problem solving. The research was revealing something profound about human nature. Their biology had freed them from constraints that shaped every other known intelligent species. The question now was whether this represented an evolutionary advantage or a potential catastrophe waiting to unfold. As Tom departed for the day, Kira began formulating her next research phase. She needed to understand not just the mechanics of human reproduction, but its broader implications for human psychology, social behavior, and their potential impact on galactic civilization. Dr. Kira Voss had assembled the largest xenobiological research team in the station's history. Representatives from 14 different species crowded into the expanded laboratory complex, each bringing their own perspective on the human reproductive anomaly. The implications of continuous male fertility were reshaping galactic understanding of civilization development. Professor Grix, an ancient being from the collective mind world of Harmony 7, spoke through his translation device with characteristic precision. In our species, reproductive seasons determine leadership hierarchies. Fertile individuals temporarily govern society, while non-fertile periods allow for philosophical and artistic development. How do humans organize social power without these Natural transitions? The human cultural attaché, Lisa, had been fielding increasingly complex questions from the research team. Human societies developed various systems: democracy, republics, monarchies, corporate structures. Power isn't tied to reproductive status, but to other factors like age, expertise, wealth, or popular support. Dr. Kira documented this exchange while monitoring the biological scans running continuously on her volunteer subjects. 3 human males, Tom, Marcus, and David, were participating in long-term studies, and all maintained consistent reproductive hormone levels despite dramatic variations in stress, diet, sleep patterns, and environmental conditions. This biological independence has profound implications, observed Dr. Yila, an amphibious researcher whose species experienced dramatic physical transformations during their annual reproductive phase. Humans can make strategic decisions, engage in complex planning, and maintain social relationships without the hormonal disruptions that govern other species' behavior patterns. The research had expanded beyond simple biological analysis. Kira now studied human historical records, social structures, and cultural artifacts to understand how continuous fertility had shaped their civilization. The patterns were remarkable. Humans had developed stable governments, long-term economic systems, and sustained technological advancement precisely because they weren't constrained by species-wide reproductive cycles. Dr. Thane projected holographic comparisons showing how other species' civilizations reflected their reproductive patterns. Crystalline cities on Nexus Prime remain largely empty for 2/3 of each cycle. Altarian commerce follows seasonal reproductive patterns. Harmonic collectives restructure their entire social organization around fertility cycles. Human cities operate continuously, Lisa explained. Our economies, governments, educational systems, and cultural institutions function year-round. We don't have seasonal shutdowns or restructuring periods. Kira realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Every other intelligent species had developed civilizations that accommodated their reproductive biology. Humans had somehow transcended these biological constraints through cultural innovation. Marcus, one of the volunteer subjects, offered an interesting perspective during his interview session. Maybe it's because we don't have an off-season that we develop such complex social rules about relationships and reproduction. We had to create cultural controls since biological ones didn't exist. This observation sparked intense discussion among the research team. Species with natural reproductive regulation had simpler social structures around mating, clear seasonal patterns, biological imperatives, and instinctive behaviors. Humans had developed elaborate courtship rituals, complex relationship structures, and sophisticated reproductive choices precisely because their biology didn't provide automatic regulation. Dr. Nala presented her analysis of human expansion patterns. Other species expand territorially during specific reproductive phases, then consolidate during non-fertile periods. Humans expand continuously, establishing permanent settlements and maintaining them indefinitely. The research team was documenting not just a biological anomaly, but a completely different evolutionary pathway. Human males' continuous fertility had contributed to a species that could sustain complex civilizations, maintain technological advancement, and expand territorially without the cyclic limitations that governed every other known intelligent species. As the research progressed, Kira began to understand why humans had achieved interstellar capability so rapidly after developing advanced technology. Unencumbered by seasonal reproductive constraints, they could maintain consistent focus on long-term projects and sustain technological development. The implications for galactic civilization were staggering, and Kira knew her research would fundamentally alter how other species understood and interacted with humanity. 6 weeks into the study, Dr. Kira Voss had transformed her research station into the galaxy's premier center for reproductive evolutionary studies. The human fertility anomaly had attracted attention from the highest levels of galactic academia, with the Xenobiological Council requesting preliminary reports and 3 universities offering funding for expanded research. The breakthrough came during a routine genetic analysis session. Dr. Zena, a multi-tentacled geneticist from the oceanic world of Aquatica, made the discovery while examining human DNA samples alongside genetic material from 17 other intelligent species. "Kira, you need to see this," Zena announced, her tentacles dancing over the holographic genetic displays. Human reproductive genetics show evidence of accelerated evolutionary pressure that other species lack. The data was remarkable. While other species maintained stable genetic patterns that aligned with their reproductive cycles, human genetics showed signs of rapid evolutionary adaptation driven by continuous reproductive selection. The implications staggered the research team. Dr. Thane materialized beside the genetic displays, his crystalline form pulsing with excitement. This suggests that humans have experienced evolutionary pressure that other species haven't. Continuous reproduction has accelerated their genetic development. David, their longest participating volunteer, listened with fascination as the scientists discussed their findings. So, you're saying that because human males don't have fertility cycles, we've evolved faster than other species? Not faster, Kira corrected, but under different selective pressures. Species with seasonal reproduction evolve primarily for survival during non-reproductive periods and mating success during fertile seasons. Humans evolved for continuous social cooperation, problem-solving, and resource acquisition. The genetic evidence supported their cultural observations. Human DNA showed markers for enhanced cognitive flexibility, social cooperation, and stress management, traits that would be essential for a species managing continuous reproductive potential within complex social structures. Professor Grix contributed his species' historical perspective. Collective mind species like ours evolved primarily for reproduction efficiency during fertile periods and intellectual development during non-fertile times. Our genetic markers reflect this specialization. Human genetics suggest adaptation for multitasking, Dr. Zena observed. They needed to simultaneously manage social relationships, economic activities, territorial expansion, and technological development without the natural breaks that other species experience. The research team conducted comparative analysis of problem-solving capabilities across species. The results were striking. Humans consistently demonstrated superior performance in scenarios requiring sustained attention, complex planning, and adaptive thinking under continuous social pressure. Marcus provided insight during his interview session. Maybe that's why humans seem so chaotic to other species. We're used to managing multiple competing priorities simultaneously. We don't have natural periods of singular focus. This observation resonated with the researchers. Other species could dedicate entire seasonal periods to specific activities: reproduction, intellectual development, territorial expansion, or resource accumulation. Humans had evolved to balance all these activities continuously. Dr. Nalla presented population dynamics analysis that supported the evolutionary theory. Human population growth patterns show rapid adaptation to resource availability, technological advancement, and environmental challenges. Other species show cyclical population patterns tied to reproductive seasons. The evolutionary advantages were becoming clear. Continuous male fertility had created selective pressure for humans to develop superior social cooperation, cognitive flexibility, and technological innovation. They couldn't rely on biological cycles to regulate their societies, so they evolved, enhanced cultural and intellectual capabilities. This explains human technological advancement, Kira noted in her research summary. While other species developed technology during specific phases of their reproductive cycles, humans could sustain technological development continuously across generations. The research was revealing that human males' unusual fertility wasn't just a biological curiosity. It was the foundation of an entirely different evolutionary strategy that had produced a species uniquely adapted for complex civilization and rapid technological advancement. The implications for understanding human potential were profound. Dr. Kira Voss's research findings had reached the highest levels of galactic government. The Interstellar Council had convened an emergency session to discuss the implications of human reproductive biology for interspecies relations, territorial agreements, and long-term galactic stability. Representatives from 43 worlds gathered virtually to address what they were calling the human question. Ambassador Rels of the Confederation of Seasonal Worlds spoke first, his species' natural diplomatic rhythms evident even through the translation system. If humans can reproduce continuously without seasonal limitations, their expansion potential exceeds anything we've previously encountered. Our territorial agreements assume cyclical population growth patterns. The research station had become a nexus of galactic attention. Kira found herself briefing council members, military strategists, and economic planners about her findings. The simple biological study had evolved into an analysis of fundamental galactic power dynamics. The reproductive advantage translates into sustained economic and technological development, Kira explained to the assembled dignitaries. While other species experience cyclical productivity tied to their reproductive seasons, humans maintain consistent industrial and intellectual output. Admiral Korex of the Multi-Species Defense Force raised concerns about military implications. Species with seasonal reproductive vulnerability can be strategically contained during fertile periods. Humans maintain consistent population and resource allocation year-round, making traditional containment strategies ineffective. Tom, Marcus, and David had become inadvertent ambassadors for human biology, fielding questions from military analysts, economists, and sociologists throughout the galaxy. Their casual acceptance of continuous fertility contrasted sharply with other species' complex seasonal adaptations. "We don't think of it as an advantage," David explained during a broadcast interview reaching 14 star systems. "It's just how we are. We developed social and cultural systems to manage what biology didn't regulate for us." Dr. Thane had been analyzing economic data from human-controlled territories. Human commerce operates on fundamentally different principles than galactic standard. While other species experience seasonal economic cycles, human markets function continuously with different regulatory mechanisms. The implications extended to resource allocation, territorial planning, and diplomatic scheduling. The Galactic Economic Council discovered that human trade agreements assumed continuous operation, rather than seasonal adjustments that governed interspecies commerce. Professor Grix presented analysis from the Collective Intelligence Network. Human decision-making processes don't include the natural pause periods that other species use for reflection and consensus building. They've developed alternative methods for managing complex choices without reproductive cycle interruptions. Dr. Yila raised concerns about cultural integration. Human social customs, entertainment, and relationship patterns operate on timescales that don't align with other species' reproductive rhythms. This could create significant challenges for mixed species communities. Kira had been documenting these integration challenges throughout her research. Human volunteers consistently struggled to understand why other species required specific seasonal accommodations for social interactions, while aliens found human continuous social activity overwhelming. Lisa, the cultural attaché, addressed the Council's concerns. Humans have experience adapting to different social patterns. We developed diverse cultures on our homeworld that had to coexist despite different approaches to resource management and social organization. The economic implications were staggering. Human productivity didn't follow seasonal patterns, meaning they could maintain consistent industrial output, research development, and territorial expansion, while other species experienced cyclical limitations. This gave them substantial advantages in interstellar competition. "We need new frameworks for interspecies cooperation," announced Council Director Vexhai. "Our existing agreements assume reproductive seasonality that humans don't experience. We must develop new approaches to territorial rights, resource allocation, and economic cooperation." Kira realized her research had uncovered something that would reshape galactic civilization. Human reproductive biology wasn't just different. It represented a fundamentally alternative evolutionary pathway that challenged basic assumptions about how intelligent species developed and interacted. The research station buzzed with activity, as scientists, diplomats, and strategists worked to understand how humanity's unique biology would affect the future of galactic civilization. 3 months after beginning her research, Dr. Kira Voss stood before the assembled Galactic Scientific Consortium, preparing to present findings that would revolutionize xenobiological understanding. Her comprehensive study of human male fertility had evolved into the most significant interspecies research project in galactic history. The presentation chamber accommodated representatives from 57 different worlds, each bringing their species' unique perspective on reproduction, evolution, and civilization development. The holographic displays showed comparative data that challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligent life. "Distinguished colleagues," Kira began, her forearms manipulating complex data visualizations, "our research reveals that humans represent not an anomaly, but an alternative evolutionary pathway that may be more successful than our traditional understanding suggested. The assembled scientists examined data showing human achievement rates across multiple metrics: technological advancement, territorial expansion, social cooperation, and problem-solving capability. In every category, humans demonstrated superior performance compared to species with seasonal reproductive patterns. Dr. Thane materialized beside the central display. The key insight is that continuous male fertility required humans to develop superior cognitive and social adaptations. They couldn't rely on biological cycles to regulate their societies, so they evolved enhanced intellectual capabilities. The evidence was comprehensive. Human brain development showed adaptations for sustained attention, complex multitasking, and social cooperation that other species lacked. Their neural architecture reflected evolutionary pressure for managing continuous reproductive potential within sophisticated social structures. Professor Zentar from the Ancient Wisdom Worlds offered historical perspective. Our species developed cyclical civilizations that peak during reproductive seasons and consolidate during non-fertile periods. Humans developed sustained civilizations that maintain continuous growth and development. Marcus, now recognized as a crucial research subject, provided human perspective on the findings. I think the key is that we had to learn to work together all the time, not just during specific seasons. We couldn't take breaks from social cooperation or economic activity. The research had identified this as the crucial evolutionary advantage. While other species could temporarily suspend complex social interactions during non-reproductive periods, humans had to maintain sophisticated relationships and economic systems continuously. This created selective pressure for enhanced social intelligence and cooperation. Dr. Zena presented genetic analysis showing how human DNA reflected these evolutionary pressures. Human genetics show markers for stress management, social flexibility, and cognitive adaptability that other species lack. They evolved specifically to handle continuous social and reproductive complexity. The breakthrough insight came from Dr. Nalla's comparative civilization analysis. Humans didn't develop despite their continuous fertility. They developed because of it. The biological pressure created evolutionary advantages that enabled superior technological and social advancement. This reversed traditional galactic assumptions about reproductive biology and civilization development. Rather than seasonal reproduction being an evolutionary advantage, continuous fertility had driven humans to develop capabilities that made them more successful at complex civilization building. Ambassador Rells spoke for many species when he observed, "This suggests that humans aren't just different. They may represent a more advanced evolutionary strategy than our own." The implications were profound. If continuous fertility led to superior evolutionary adaptations, other species might need to reconsider their understanding of biological development and civilization potential. Tom provided the most insightful observation during the final interview session. Maybe the real difference is that we learned early that biology doesn't determine destiny. We had to create our own solutions instead of following instinctive patterns. Kira realized that this was the core discovery. Humans had transcended biological determinism through cultural and intellectual evolution. They had developed conscious control over reproduction, social organization, and technological development, rather than relying on instinctive seasonal patterns. The research established that human males' continuous fertility wasn't just a reproductive quirk. It was the foundation of an evolutionary strategy that had produced a species uniquely capable of sustained technological and social advancement. The galactic community would need to completely reconsider their understanding of human potential and their own evolutionary limitations. 1 year after Dr. Kira Voss began her modest study of human reproductive patterns, the galaxy had fundamentally altered its understanding of evolution, civilization, and the future of interstellar society. Her research station had become the center of the most significant paradigm shift in galactic history. The Interstellar Development Initiative had established new protocols based on her findings. Traditional assumptions about species capability, territorial expansion rates, and technological development timelines were being revised to account for what researchers now called the human model of continuous evolutionary pressure. "We've been thinking about evolution backward," Kira explained to the assembled Galactic Council. "We assumed seasonal reproduction was an evolutionary advantage because it provided rest periods and focused energy. Humans prove that continuous pressure creates superior adaptations. The practical implications were reshaping galactic civilization. Human colonies were demonstrating sustained growth rates that exceeded all projections. Their technological development continued at unprecedented pace, unencumbered by the seasonal limitations that governed other species' research and development cycles. Dr. Thane had been working with human scientists to understand their approach to long-term planning. Humans think in continuous timelines rather than seasonal cycles. This allows them to pursue projects that span decades or centuries without natural interruption periods. 3 human volunteers, Tom, Marcus, and David, had become inadvertent ambassadors for their species' potential. Their participation in extended studies had helped other species understand how continuous reproductive capability translated into sustained social and technological achievement. The biggest surprise, David reflected during his final interview, is learning that what we considered normal is actually extraordinary. We never realized that other species couldn't maintain year-round focus on complex projects. The economic implications had revolutionized galactic trade. Human economic systems, designed for continuous operation, were proving more efficient and adaptable than seasonal economic models. Several species were attempting to modify their economic structures to incorporate human innovations. Professor Grix announced that the Collective Intelligence Network was restructuring their approach to knowledge sharing. Human cognitive patterns suggest that continuous intellectual development may be superior to our traditional cyclical learning models. Dr. Yila presented evolutionary biology findings that were transforming galactic science. We're discovering that many species may have evolutionary potential they've never accessed, because they rely on seasonal reproduction patterns rather than developing continuous capability. The research had inspired experimental programs on 14 worlds where species were attempting to modify their reproductive cycles to achieve more consistent development patterns. Early results suggested that some species could adapt to reduced seasonal variation with significant benefits. Marcus provided insight that would influence interstellar policy for generations. I think the real lesson is that biological limitations don't have to determine civilization capability. Species can evolve beyond their original constraints through conscious choice and cultural development. Ambassador Rels announced new Confederation policies based on the research findings. We're revising our territorial agreements, resource allocation protocols, and diplomatic frameworks to account for species with continuous development capabilities like humans. The military implications had been equally significant. Admiral Corex reported that multi-species defense force strategies were being completely restructured. Humans have demonstrated that continuous operational capability provides significant strategic advantages. We're adapting our defense planning accordingly. Kira's final research report would become the foundation document for what historians would later call the Second Galactic Renaissance. Her work had proven that humans weren't just another species joining galactic civilization. They represented an evolutionary pathway that could revolutionize how all species approach development and achievement. The most remarkable discovery, Kira concluded in her presentation to the Galactic Scientific Consortium, is that humans achieved this not by being biologically superior, but by refusing to accept biological limitations. They created cultural and technological solutions to transcend their evolutionary constraints. As the research station prepared to transition into a permanent institute for evolutionary development studies, Tom offered the observation that would define humanity's role in galactic civilization. Maybe the point isn't that we don't have a mating season. Maybe the point is that we decided every season could be a season for growth, learning, and building something better. The galaxy would never be the same, and humanity had shown that evolution was far from finished with any species willing to transcend their limitations. End of story.